And good day to you wherever you are. My name's Craig Sullivan, and this is the talk that I did on the 28th of June, 2023 at Experimentation Elite. Very good quality speakers. Disclaimer, I was one of them, of course, but I really enjoyed the presentations at this conference. Please go. It's on again in December. But back to the talk, and this is what I'm talking about today. I'm going to explain what's happening, show you some real examples, and actually get you started using AI in your work, right? It's not scary, it's pretty easy, and it doesn't have to be geeky either. I've put together a full pack of resources in this deck, so download it using the link at the bit.ly link at the bottom here, and you'll have about 80 articles, guides, examples, and some inspiration too. So everybody's been getting really hyped up about the recent advances in AI technology. Things have been going gangbusters, right? So here we are in London 2023. Things haven't been going so well recently since Brexit, but wait a minute, someone's telling us it's going to get much, much worse, right? How can that be, right? Within 2 years, these new AI gods will have enslaved the human race. Really? But what about the bit before we've managed to do this? This is what today is about, this talk, not the existential threats of tomorrow, but the opportunities and risks today, right? So what's the hype about? Well, it's mainly about these things called LLMs or large language models, right? Which are a type of foundation model. I'll get back to that in a minute. But this is what the hype is mainly about, right? And these are powering a lot of the chat interfaces that you see. So they're basically machine learning models that are incredibly good with words. I mean, that is probably an understatement. They are excellent with words, truly superb, right? But why is that? Because of all that machine learning training. And it's a type of foundation model, which is essentially a base layer of a number of structures that you implement in order to build apps. But this is the bit at the bottom. And here's an example from a couple of days ago of the kind of ecosystems for large language models. Don't worry, it will be out of date in a week. Just go to these websites and they'll probably have updated them. But back to what they are. How do they learn language? How do they learn this language so well? How do they acquire these skills? But it's actually a little bit like watching a child learn. At first, they don't speak very many words, right? But over a period of time through trial and error and mainly repetition, right? Copying and understanding patterns in the language, they get to be able to converse with you. And it's an amazing thing to see if you have a child, right? But that's kind of the way that the LLM is working, except what we're doing is that we're just shoving vast amounts of unprocessed data off the internet and giving it to it. I mean, what could possibly go wrong with that? But really, this is all it is, right? When it boils down to it, it's a prediction engine in a way. Which bit of text goes with which other bit of text? Which answer goes with a question, right? What is the most similar thing to this, right? That's also in this large chunk of text that comes off the internet. And so you can basically work out what the missing words are from a probability, right? And it's very clever the way it works, but we need to talk about how we can actually turn this into practical stuff. But let's get one thing clear. It doesn't understand the words in the same way that a human does, right? Let me repeat that again. It doesn't understand the words, right? It's not super intelligent. It's not advanced general intelligence. It's not going to enslave the world, right? It's not clever, right? It's none of those things, right? In fact, you could most equate it with saying it's basically a non-annoying and quite helpful contextual version of Clippy, the Microsoft assistant, right? If anyone remembers this, it was a hateful thing. Whoever coded it should have been ashamed and go home and have a shower, right? But it was really annoying and it wasn't helpful and it jumped in at the wrong times, right? So That's where GPT is now, as far as I'm concerned, but just not annoying. And if we're looking for vectors of where enslavement of the human race will come from, or the Terminator style future that's often posed, uh, is this stuff that we're looking at right now, the chat GPT and these AI tools, is this our new God coming? No, it's not going to enslave humanity. It's probably going to be like an armed robot, right? So if you arm a robot with a couple of machine guns and rocket-propelled grenade launcher, and you sent it into a city and you gave it hacking skills, I mean, just think of the damage that that could do. It could take over all your computer networks in the entire city, right? And it's if you're looking for something that's going to be the vector of something that could potentially attack our infrastructure and take away our access to it, then autonomous weaponry is probably one of the most likely in my view. But all the hype about, oh, isn't it amazing what ChatGPT can do? And it's like, wow, it's almost like lifelike, and wow, it talks like a real person. And, oh, it can imitate all these voices and ways of writing. We've been here before. Let me remind you about a chatbot called Eliza. It was the first program capable of attempting the Turing test for intelligence back in 1966. You can read the story on Wikipedia. But the interesting thing is that people were totally convinced that this was intelligent, even when the guy who coded it told them, no, it's not intelligent. It's like a really simple program. It just turns your answers back at you like a Rogerian psychologist, right? Psychotherapist. So basically, it's kind of like, how do you feel about that? Or how does that make you feel type stuff, or turning things around. Is there anyone else that makes you feel that way? So the problem is that people imbued it with a sense of intelligence that wasn't actually there, even when presented with factual evidence. They also got emotionally attached to the program, occasionally completely forgetting that they were conversing with a computer. And the guy who wrote it, his own secretary, asked him to leave the room so that she could have a private chat with Eliza. And he said that basically short exposures to a relatively simple computer program could induce powerful delusional thinking in quite normal people. And that's the important thing. Don't get carried away, right? It's that don't imagine that there's some intelligence there, super intelligence that actually doesn't exist. And here's a good example of using it, a real example. I would normally take a lot of time agonizing over my talk for the conference. The title and synopsis would take a few hours, write the outline, check I'd not missed anything, then loads of time building the slides and getting the graphics and sorting that stuff out. And then a little bit of time left to sort of like practice it and present, but not much, right? Whereas with the AI slide prep, right, I gave GPT an outline, a kind of two-paragraph outline, asked it to come up with a title. Nice title, edited it a tiny bit. It wasn't perfect, but once I finished it was very good. Then I took the title and the synopsis and fed it back to GPT and gave it some instructions about how to create a slide outline, which I then copy and pasted as one chunk of text into Magic Slides, which then created Google Slides with images off a site called Pexels, which are royalty free, right? So I now have a huge chunk of time that I can use to actually work on the material, right? The narrative and practice it and make the talk better. So it's changing the way that I fundamentally do all of my work, even presentations. And AI isn't going to replace you. It's going to be another human being that's using AI more productively than you that's going to replace you. And this is why it's important, especially if we want to be all of us who are all of you who are listening to this presentation, if you're going to be making decisions with AI in your work that have implications for other human beings and their lives and their economic situations, right? Who best to help us watch out for the ethics of this situation, right? If we want to actually be part of the conversation about what the opportunities and dangers are of AI technology and how we avoid some of the more deleterious human consequences, then we all need to lean into this. There's no way of saying, do you know what, I'm not going to use this because I don't believe in the motives of the people who are using it. There are some amazing motives here and good intent about using this technology as well as bad intent. Don't blame the knife, blame the wielder, right? And so having us lean in to using AI in our work allows us to understand it a lot more comprehensively and therefore understand the risks a lot more comprehensively. Please, you are all the people who will be making decisions about this in the future, so make them wisely. Lean in first. And to give you some good examples to start digging into, and they're all covered in the resource pack at the end of the deck. When it comes to CRO, uh, user research, market research, copy research, competitor research, you can pretty much use GPT for all stages of the cycle, right? Market and user research is very interesting. Ideation and prioritization work. Also considering ideas that maybe you had dismissed or maybe not thought about. Wireframing and design work, there are some definitely useful elements that can be AI driven there or supportive. Understanding markets, figuring out how certain markets are set up, composed, who the players are, what their major onboarding processes are, how much it costs, things like that. Really, really useful. Very good for competitor analysis, right? A lot of people are starting to use GPT in the kind of financial work and investment work to actually do more stuff at scale. And that's very interesting. But for me, one of the biggest things is if you're doing anything with words, marketing, branding, you're writing persuasive copy for the site, you're putting together video transcripts for your TV adverts, right? You need to understand the semantic and emotional layer out there, what customers are saying and what words they use. And that's not just about you, that's about other brands as well, right? And that's where it gets interesting. So in 9 minutes, I needed to do some research on a landing page. It was around a natural product, which was an alternative to a number of prescription medications, right? But uh, in that 9 minutes, I got the cost of the prescription meds versus natural remedies. Not 100% correct because it didn't show me the variation in the cost of those prescription medicines, but I got a ballpark figure. But I was able to contrast that with the cost of the natural remedies per month in the market. I also understood why customers specifically chose natural remedies over the prescription meds, and that's this stuff on the right here. Again, very interesting. Also fed in a number of products and asked them about the transformational benefits of those products and getting their situation resolved, and also figured out what drugs were normally prescribed for this and understanding of the market for alternative remedies. But an interesting delta was how people felt inside when they had this problem and hadn't gotten it resolved, and how it made them feel afterwards, right? In that delta, is some amazing marketing copy, right? Trust me. And here's a whole bunch of resources from the pack later on. It was just to give you an example. There's all the stuff that you'll need in there. So this covers a whole load of kind of research, UX, design, competitor research, stuff like that. So that'll give you examples here to get going with. Sentiment analysis has been around for a while. There are a lot of tools that do it. It's really useful for so many things, right? But AI can actually label and classify vast amounts of feedback way, way better than the sentiment tools that are out there, right? So you can start to mine not only the sentiments, right, but the problems, the praise, the difficulties, the bugs or complaints, right? Just looking at sentiment is an interesting layer in itself, right? But it doesn't tell you why, right? If you have a smiley face, right? Well, it's good that it was a positive sentiment, but what was the sentiment about and what did it explain and what was the semantic and emotional layer there, right? So pulling out that emotional layer as well as the breakdown of positive and negative sentiment drivers is very, very interesting. And you can feed all sorts of stuff into this, voice calls, phone calls, raw text, emails, customer feedback, anything. Um, This summarization area is a whole super interesting area, and me, Iqbal Ali, and Momoko Price have been playing around with this mainly because we want a tool to help us in our work. We often get large amounts of customer feedback, reviews, raw text, right? And we would really like to mine it for useful stuff, right? It's good for copyright and research and marketing stuff and advertising and acquisition work. It's good for so many things. You can really crush a whole load of text and extract a whole load of highly summarized and very accurate information about it that humans could never do. This is not a job that anyone's ever going to have. It would take too long to do 10,000 reviews. It's going to like take weeks. It's not going to happen. But now we can do it, right? We can summarize, we can categorize, we can count the number of times those themes come up within unstructured text, right? But a warning for you, if you upload a summary of text to the chat UI or a document or something and ask it to summarize it and count the stuff up, just try running it 5 times, right? Because it's not going to give you the same answer. And there are some reasons for that, right? But when you pre-process and work on the data, it's 95 to 98% accurate and get super stuff out of it. So here's an example of, in the wild, the kind of real review data that you will actually get. Thanks God it wasn't too hot or too humid when I was visiting the park. Otherwise, it would be a big issue. There's not a lot of shade. I've arrived until 10:30 and left at 6. Unfortunately, it didn't last until evening parade, but 8.5 hours was too much for me. There's plenty to do anyway. It goes on and on like this, right? To manually classify this and pull it apart into all its constituent components would take a while. How do you identify the main themes in there, right? Okay, you can get a one-line review that's a lot shorter, but some of them are very complicated. Customer feedback often has a number of themes in there, right? So you need to break this apart, and the AI is really good, right? So we get it to not only rewrite that review so that any human reading it can actually understand it, right? But we do that without losing any of the density of information in there, right? But we are also able to lift out, you see the different colors here, the red theme, the blue theme, the cyan theme, right? They were all lifted out separately so that when you actually then finally process all the thematic instances that you've pulled out of this lump of feedback, then you can actually get accurate counts out of it and separate all the issues properly. If you would like us to crunch some feedback and like give you the answers to 10 AI questions, like list all the feedback reporting bugs or problems with the website, or when people complain about delivery, what are the delivery companies, the brands they mention most often, right? So we can do for £5,000, we can do up to 5,000 data rows, and £8,000 is up to 10,000 data rows. We'll give you a summary of all the topics and frequency, and we'll give you the answer to 10 questions and help you draft those questions as well. Don't worry, we won't ask you to provide them. We'll help put them together based on our read of the data. Regression is another really interesting thing because another type of customer feedback is review data, but we have a score against it. So what we can do is work out with regression, what are the things that crop up that most push people towards a negative review and most push them towards a positive review. Now, some of these are going to be obvious, like the package actually arrived, right? That's usually a good indicator that, or the delivery was quick or as expected. These are kind of like Kano basics, right? It's not lighting up anyone's life that you meet the expectation of delivering the item. But the second order effects in this data where you're using regression and kind of NLP work to work out what the themes are that are driving the headline review scores that you're getting, that's the stuff that's super, super interesting. Get in touch if you're interested. Contact Center AI has been around for a couple of years. Really starting to take off now with GPT because you can have unified text, CRM, and voice, right? So all your voice can be transcribed to text, all chat can be transcribed to text, all emails can go into text, right? All of your CRM data about the customer can go in there, right? And then the AI can support the agent. So it's like a co-pilot for the agent saying, oh, based on what your customer is saying, I think the answer to that is this item in the knowledge base number 332. Well, great, thanks. Or being able to actually fetch, suggest information contextually as the call is being handled is quite a cool thing, right? And it can do that way better than any human can because it has access to a vast corpus of information about the customer that you could never fit on the screen of an agent, right? It's not going to happen. Can also analyze all the your voice calls in real time so your agents don't have to classify them. If a customer calls up about 5 problems, the AI will count the 5 issues and exactly what they are. You don't need to have a drop down like what was the customer call about, and you don't need to choose one thing because it's often about several things, right? But it will be able to tell you all sorts of things about how the call went, whether anyone got like angry, right? It'll be able to look at the emotional layer in the calls, sentiment. So storing and summarizing all voice calls for analysis is all really interesting. If you took a big call center and collected this data for a week or two, you'd be able to see some really interesting trends in the type of categorized data that's coming in. And I don't care what your categorization system is at the call center right now, it does not map onto customer categories. And this will change because AI will tell you what customers are talking about, not the definition of what call reasons are in your IT system. Private domain AI, still a bit on the slow side, getting it better, but you can do things like feed your hard drive data to it. You can give it slides and documents, manuals, knowledge base articles, video, and more, right? And for me, it's actually quite helpful to find slides because I could do a search for something that's not a keyword match and it will find it semantically, which is dead handy when I'm thinking, oh, I had a slide like 7 years ago. I have no idea where it is, right? Should we get Microsoft to search for it? No. You can also upload data to ChatGPT, and all of these kind of file types can be handled if you want to ask questions about it. But there's Chat PDF for uploading PDFs, Book GPT for longer documents, and there's a Chat GPT file uploader for various other file types. It means you can get around some of the character limitations, but more importantly, you can upload contextual data so that the chat that you're having with GPT about something is infused with the data. That's the best way of explaining it. So some case studies that were really interesting to me or blew my mind was that IKEA's AI Billy now handles 47% of all inbound customer calls. So what happened to the staff? Did they fire them all? And cut costs? No, they didn't. They retrained them. These people really know about the company, right? So they retrained them as design advisors, right? They now sell product, right? So cutting costs is obvious, but this is a really good example of ethical and positive AI behavior, right? Because sales by phone and video is 1.3 billion by those call center handlers in 2022, but it's going to be 5 billion by 2028, right? So if you're going to fire all the people that you trained to know your business, right, and then have to rehire them as your sales grow by phone and video calling, then that would be a really stupid thing to do as a business. Instead, what IKEA are doing is strengthening their workers' employability and also accelerating the creation of new jobs. I reckon that's worth a round of applause there. Keep it up. Great example. Wimbledon can't afford commentators in smaller courts and matches. I sometimes watch some of the qualifying stuff or some of the stuff on the lesser courts, right? And it can get a bit dull because no one's talking. It's just like crisp bags rustling, people coughing, and grunting sounds and the sound of the ball, right? But Wimbledon are going to use a multimodal AI, cameras, data, sound to actually commentate on these matches. And it will do other things. It will give prediction stats for players to make it into the next round. It will also be providing the commentary for highlight reels, which is really cool, right? These are not jobs that are being taken away. This is a job that would never happen, right? This one blew my mind, literally, totally. By training GPT using fMRI data, right, we're getting 82% accuracy on reading words from the speech centers of your brain, right? So if you think something silently like that person's an asshole, right? Like, yeah, it can read that. It can read imagined speech, like you imagining your friend talking to you about something. Narrative speech, where you're, say, listening to a podcast, it can decode that happening inside your brain. But also silent videos. You remember when three of your friends were all sharing a joke in the pub one evening, right? All the speech that's included in that recollection can get decoded as well. But the thing I was thinking about was you could go to bed at night, right? And wear one of these and then wake up in the morning and you'd have all your dreams transcribed. Kind of quite worrying, scary, but also exciting all at the same time. And the possibilities for this could be potentially that people could use this to communicate that are unable to communicate via voice right now, who are locked in and communicate in near real time too, right, by just imagining the silent speech that they want vocalized, right? So that's fascinating from a medical and neurological standpoint. It's got huge possibilities. But also imagine if the police used it to interrogate you, or spies used it to interrogate a captured person, right? They would be able to try and ask you things in order for you to replay words or potentially images eventually, I would have thought, and actually read them from your brain, right? Something even like this one slide just creates a number, a little of avalanches in my mind about the societal implications of some of this technology. And not all of it is bad. Some of it is incredibly good. So I have a couple of clients that use translation software, right? But you can use translation software in one sense to build a website and then translate this stuff to other markets. And right now, some of that doesn't really work very well because tone of voice can get lost, semantic meaning, idiomatic expressions. Particularly when it comes to content and microcopy, that stuff is really, really important on site. So, uh, testing sort of AI versus humans, I gave a bunch of reviewers some copy areas to fix, and I compared the humans to the GPT translation. And my initial test shows GPT is hitting the sweet spot most of the time. So we won't need to spend as much time fixing this, and we also need to fix it at source. And if you look at this article at the bottom of the screen here, that will show you where GPT 3.5 was in terms of comparison to other translation systems. And I'm pretty confident that GPT will have matched or exceeded the best of them, probably not long after I do this talk. This one's really cool. It's by a company called V7 Labs, and it's a great example of multimodal AI in that they're collecting image data, mashing that with business data and demand data from the companies they're selling to. But about 40% costs here on labor, right? So that's kind of important, the timing on that. Get that wrong, and it costs you loads of money. But much of the rest of it is incorrect yield predictions, right? Having too many strawberries when people don't want them, or not having enough strawberries when supermarkets want tons of them, right? So timing is like super critical for the profitability of this business. But AI, a multimodal AI, a different conglomeration of systems and data, predicts correct yield 6 weeks ahead of existing systems, right? So what's the impact on the business? Well, reduced labor, it increases the sales yield and smooths demand. Net result of this is more of the strawberries that are grown and the costs that are required to grow them result in a profitable sale to somebody. Sweet. An optimized business by AI. And autonomous agents are really cool, right? You should play around with these. You can give it a go using natural language. Like I would like you to order a cheese-filled crust pizza, 12-inch of this type from this restaurant. Go! It's like a dog. Fetch, boy. Um, it can order pizza, make videos, scrape websites, write code. It will install apps for itself. It will monitor competitors. It will find the lowest price. It will watch websites for you. Have a play. It's really cool. And there's some really good examples in this article of things that you can do with AutoGPT. But here's another underlying technology. It's really good. What if we wanted to build an HR bot? Like if I go to the average IT team in a company and say, I'd like to build an HR bot and I'd like to do it in 2 days' time, people would laugh at you, say, "Oh, it's going to take weeks, mate," right? But this is seriously getting rewired, right? So imagine I have a bot and I want it to answer lots of boring questions like how many days holiday have I got left, and there may be questions that I want to ask like how much will I get if I cash in all my holiday, right? I might not want to ask the HR team that question, but I might be cool asking the bot. But how would that kind of work? How would you wire all that up, right? And LangChain comes in here because it's like AutoGPT, but it's for chaining or processing stuff. It's a bit like Zapier or for say for chaining multiple AI tools, right? Let's see the HR bot example. If you look at the trace on the left here, you'll see it's reading out loud what it's doing, right? I need to check the timekeeping policies and the employee data to calculate the amount here, right? So it goes off to check the policy document, finds the bit about the holiday encashment, and then it looks up the employee's record in SAP and then does a calculation, math calculation for the redemption rate and then the value, and then shows it back to the person, right? And it's just like a little chain. You've kind of glued it together, right? Brilliant stuff. But the future of some of this stuff is in multimodal technology. So a bottle of wine falls off a shelf in aisle three, right? What happens? Well, the camera spots it, right? It figures out the cost of the item, which it also updates the stock in the back end, marks down the tax loss on the item, pings the cleaner by tannoy. Spillage in aisle three, cleaner, please attend, and it will text the store manager, and it will also use the camera to measure exactly when the spillage was mopped up by the cleaner. So amazing stuff. And what about experimentation? What about AI and A/B testing and automation of that work? Well, it's already happening. Writing code for A/B tests is being done right now. I know of 3 places trialing it. It's working absolutely fine. And yes, it's more about tweaking existing code necessarily than writing some of the gnarlier custom implementations. But think about it. Your developers don't want to be working on the grunt work of tweaking one tiny ID inside a bit of experiment code and then doing all the work that's involved there, right? To check that in, right? So it's going to save a lot of dev time on boring tasks, on grunt tasks, right? So we can take a whole load of experiment deployment and get someone else to do them that doesn't mind doing the boring tasks. And dynamic personalization here, showing the right thing at the right time in the right place. How do we get to this idea of one-to-one personalization, or certainly very small segments of personalization that are hyper efficient, right? Well, you can use machine learning and multimodal AI to reverse engineer the outcomes. You figure out the patterns and drivers that are actually causing the outcomes that you're after, and you dynamically alter, personalize, iterate, and test all of the content along this entire chain. And it gives you hyper personalization, but the whole point behind it is that you can now scale personalization and do it with much less work to reach that scale than you ever were to before. And it also applies to landing pages. It's now possible to get AI to build and continually iterate and tweak a whole bunch of landing pages, 1,000 of them, no problem. 10,000 of them, yeah, that's fine too. So you can start to create a lot of things and manage them that humans weren't able to do before. Augmented by this technology, they're able to reach far farther than they could. But what if you could tag all of your A/B tests, right? Well, one of the interesting things, if you start to put metadata into your A/B test repository or your history of all your results, is put in the page type. Was it a product page? Was it the home page? Was it part of the checkout? Was it the shipping page? The page type, the psychological levers, the hypothesis, the copy, the images, the metric, the results. You can feed all of this stuff into a database. And some larger organizations that collect thousands of experiments a year are doing this with their own data. And it's actually helping them get better at predicting which experiments are more likely to succeed. And that increases the success rate metric of all their experiment programs. Vendors are also trying to do this across all of their customer data. The problem they have is not all of it is tagged correctly, but AI can actually help with auto tagging some of this and working out the context of the page and the type of page from the words on there and the images, right? But essentially, here what happens is you get to interrogate your own AI database of tests, right? And ask for a prediction score. Hey, I've got this new test based on all the 10,000 tests that we've run before. What's your prediction score that this will be a success? And that's an interesting figure. It's not telling you what to do, it's advising you. It's another co-pilot. Analyzing test results can be quite boring, but early days on this, we should be able to automate quite a lot of the easy stuff. And that reduces analyst time. You know, a lot of this gets done manually, which I still hate. I wish all of it was automated, but reducing this is one of the games that I'm interested in, and that then means that you can also use the AI to provide co-pilot support for analysis to the analyst on other work, right? So automation of more complex pieces is going to happen soon. Is we're just going to start with the lower hanging fruit, but this is happening. And no, it doesn't always work. Someone asked me to, a lot of this AI stuff will be flaky. A lot of the slide generation tools I've used are not quite right. You'll find it won't generate you an image perfectly all the time. Just like give it a break. It's like early days, right? And this stuff is changing every week. But it also means that you're going to come across stuff that doesn't work, right? And it's a bit like early days of the internet when we had graphical browsers, right? There were a lot of browsers around. Some of them worked better than others, and some strong ones kind of grew in market share because lots of people liked using them. Same will happen here. Not everything's going to be right to start with. So I looked at this thing called CRO Professor, and all of the three answers it gave me were pretty limited, really. It wouldn't be the advice that I would give out to people asking this question as a general thing, but it needs loads more data, right? And it needs loads more sources, right? And I think a curated, incredible kind of data filter here would only improve a system like this. And I genuinely think in our community, we need to build a kind of curated AI repo for experimentation, white papers, articles, guides, and video, right? Because it actually gives good stuff to train the AI off rather than the vast corpus of information on the internet, which is not always reliable or good. And so, where are we? This is the AI hype cycle. Well, first people start playing with this stuff, and it's great, right? And they get chat UI, then they'll get API access, and then come up with some crazy ideas. And this is like peak stupid that you reach, right? Because you start thinking of all the cool stuff that you can build rather than all the problems that you can solve. But then you also discover it doesn't work reliably. You thought the AI was going to solve it, but there are some limitations. You can't productionize it, right? It can't easily be built, right? It costs more than your existing system. Once you factor in all the calls that you make to the AI system, it ends up costing you twice as much. Duh. So you end up in unhappy AI Valley. And that's when you think, why don't we concentrate on real user problems that we can actually solve here, right? Not solutions being tacked onto a business, but problems that we can actually constructively solve we couldn't do before. And data science and data engineering are the way out of this, right? Along with rigorous testing. If you're going to come up with something that purports to summarize or crunch data or provide you with wisdom, then it jolly better work, right? So if it's not ready, don't put it out. Test it, test it. When Iqbala and I were working on some of these summarization problems, I reckon we've gone over 130, 140 times where all of the stuff failed that we were trying to do. It's just the reason it works now is because we didn't give up early. And that's how you get a working product and escape to the sunny AI plateau. So here is my checklist for you for AI survival in the coming months and years. GPT still can't do maths, concrete facts, and is still prone to hallucination, right? Read up on that. But a bigger problem for you potentially is that GPT-4 is still stuck in 2021. If you ask it about A/B testing tools to use, it will happily offer you Google Optimize, even though it's no longer available. And if you do summarization of any types of unstructured data, using GPT chat window alone is not enough, right? You'd have to do processing on it. Always check the stuff that GPT gives to you. Been lawyers upbraided recently for using fictitious case references in court because they didn't check the citations that GPT gave it, right? Duh. Treat it like a fun and useful intern, right? That sets the trustworthiness of the kind of data. Like they might have a cool idea, but we better double check that that's actually possible. So use it as an additional member of the team for brainstorming or generating ideas, right? And most failures that I see on all of this technology are from 100% trusting every output that you get from the AI. You can't do that. In order to get our summarization working, we had to run some manual data sets that I did by hand, and we had to compare those results to the AI summarization to tell if it was working, right? To have a metric to work against. So if you have that kind of thinking, you'll probably be able to build a better product. Ask GPT for the sources, right? Or use something like Bard search, which shows you the sources. Do source checking on the information that you get. And if you need more recent articles, use Google Scholar, which will give you papers post 2021. And if a paper is referenced or summarized in an answer that GPT gives to you, please go and read and check the original paper. I know it might be boring, but remember I told you about those stories of people being caught out. You need to be careful. And if you want concrete facts, maths, and it will also do some cool visualizations with the data too, you can use Wolfram Alpha's plugin here. And there's an interesting article that explains what ChatGPT cannot do. Don't ask it this stuff, right? Um, Words, it's good with words. Remember that, right? And check your sources. Just put in, please explain the thing that you want using in-text citations and a bibliography, and you'll get all the references to the books and the white papers, articles, and websites and stuff. And last but not least, follow Ruben de Boer's advice here. He gave me this advice in a call, and I thought it was a brilliant example. And here's some, right? Ask GPT to find a recipe, get it to convert American measurements to European measurements, because that's really hard to do. Feed it all your data and notes, ask it questions, get it to help you plan an event, a wedding, a meetup of some friends. It's pretty cool. Pick a restaurant for you, make it build your slides for you like I did today. It'll also draft you an individual workout plan. You've got that sore knee you've been working on. You need to build up some strength in that area of your leg, right? And let's get a workout plan going for that. Get it to make a pub quiz for you and your friends. But another one that I love here is as a guy, I'm terrible at color matching. Like you give me stuff and I try and match it together, and it's just people end up laughing, right? It's so bad, right? But GPT is really good at helping you match up stuff in an outfit, and it will also tell you how to kind of accessorize it, what shoes to wear, things like that. It's wonderful. Please try it out, play, and you will learn from that. One great example is I've been going to Estonia, Tallinn, amazing country, amazing people, wonderful city. And I've been going there for 12 years. And I gave it this prompt: I love architecture, food, history, wine. Give me a 5-day trip itinerary. And I know all the places on the itinerary. I've been to them already, but the itinerary was really good. It's better than any package holiday that you will ever get to that city, right? GPT had an excellent response there. But I'm reminded of this. I'm always drawn back to this when I think of AI work, right? Because when I watched Sigourney Weaver in the Aliens film, I was like, yeah, I want one of those robot exoskeletons. But I was struck by the fact that it's still Sigourney Weaver in there, right? It's just she's able to do things that she wouldn't be able to on her own. but she's still Sigourney Weaver. It's not the robot doing the stuff or making the movements or fighting the alien or kicking its ass. It's Sigourney doing it, right? So she's just the same Sigourney, but bigger, better, faster, stronger than she was before. And she's on a level playing field with the alien now. That's the amazing thing. That's what AI gives you. That's you, but on AI. You have far more reach to be able to do these things, accomplish tasks, and crunch data than you've ever had before. Please play, have fun, get in touch if you would like some data crunching done or a tool built. Thank you very much. I hope you liked the presentation. Please let me know on LinkedIn. You can also download the slides with the full resource pack. That's there on the bottom. And get in touch with me and Iqbal if you have any questions or interest in the whole summarization area. Thank you. Goodbye.